Okay, we'll go ahead and use some carbon paper and trace out the Raspberry Pi logo. Then we're going to use our Dremel tool with the router bit, and we're going to go ahead and cut out in a clockwise direction, not counterclockwise, because if you go counterclockwise, what you're cutting out is just going to weld itself back in. Not perfect, but neither am I. Okay, I've already modified the display area to accept the LCD that I'm going to put in there, and I filled in the floppy drive port since we're not going to be using that anymore. Yeah, that fit perfect. Now I went ahead and sanded it down and hit it with slurry, and also I filled in the Apple logo because, let's face it, this is not an Apple machine anymore. And I took off the identifying information on the back, and I'm going to put another cutout, something right there, I don't know what. Okay, now whenever I did the modification for the LCD on the Macintosh SC30, it's pretty easy because the front bezel is really flat, and you've got a lot of lip to work with. Whenever you go ahead and you put down your LCD, you can see where I have all that extra plastic to work with on the sides, so I will be able to take out that radius at the very bottom. But whenever you're dealing with the Classic or Classic II front bezels, you notice they conform to the CRT and curve. Now what happens is that doesn't leave you hardly any lip on the sides, so you're going to have to really dig into plastic if you want to go ahead and take out that radius that you have at the bottom. Here we have the modified faceplate, and if you look, I had to take off a lot of plastic on the sides, and we still have that bit of that radius there. I wasn't able to get it completely flat, so we're going to have some gap there when we go to put the LCD on. But let's go ahead and do a trial fit and see how it looks. I'm satisfied with it. If you look, we've got some really teeny mounting holes on this LCD, which I have these teeny mounting screws, 2mm, and we're going to go ahead and grab our Dremel tool, which has a 2mm bit, and we're going to tap it out here, and here, with that. Yeah, let's go ahead and get it mounted. Okay, well that's not bad. There is still somewhat of a gap, but you know what? No one's really going to notice that. I mean, it's really dark in there. Yeah, I like the way that fit came out. Okay, here it is, and I have to say that this was the hardest part of the project, was getting this painted. Before I do any painting, the night before, I look up the weather and I make sure that it's not going to be windy and that it's going to be low humidity. And then I recheck it the next morning. Now, there was not supposed to be any wind. Visibility was great. It was a beautiful, clear day. And then out of nowhere, a gust from the east comes and sends this rolling about 5 meters, and it's covered with sand. So I had to go down and strip it, and I waited a couple days, and I made sure there was no wind, low humidity again. And we live on a farm to market road where we have trucks that go through here carrying hay bales. Well, I hadn't seen one of these trucks in 6 months, right? So I got out there, I put down 2 coats, and then a truck comes by, hay is blowing everywhere, and it floats over, and the computer looks like a porcupine. So then I had to strip it down and paint it again. So finally I was able to get 4 coats of white on it. But man, what a pain it was. So I had just put down my last coat of red, the 4th coat, and there was a dirt dauber that was buzzing around me, so I swatted it and the little bastard landed right there. And then he was flopping about all in the red, and then he came over here and he left little dirt dauber pecker tracks all across here, and then he flew off and gave me a dirt dauber middle finger. And yeah, so I had to go back through here, sand that down, and then I had to touch it up. Yeah, so I like the way that came out. Cut out. Oh, look what I did there. You get it? Huh? Raspberry Pi? Raspberry Pi? Huh? Yeah. It came out good. It really did. Get a little sticker. I use Krylon Fusion paint to paint this. This stuff is great, and it is really tough. Now, the reason I use Krylon paint is because of this. Yep, I painted this probably about 4 years ago, and I use it in the field for notes. I use my Apple Newton Message Pad 2000. It gets tossed around the cab of the truck. It gets tossed into backpacks. Yeah, durable. It has a couple of very small nicks on it. And yeah, it's dirty. I haven't cleaned it off. But that stuff, it works great. Okay, I was going to wait and do this video until I got my resin in, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon. Now, the reason I'm waiting on the resin is I have the cutout, and I'm going to take this acrylic, I'm going to mount it back here, right? And then I'm going to pour in translucent resin, green for the leaves, and of course red for the raspberry. And yeah, so that's going to look really well. And on this side, I'm not going to put anything on here. I'm just going to put a sheet of acrylic right there and a sheet of acrylic behind this. so we can see in there and see what's going on. So for a Raspberry Pi build, we're going to need a Raspberry Pi, and this is a Raspberry Pi 4B 4GB model. Okay, and to power the project, at first I was going to go ahead and use an ATX Flex supply, but you know, that really is an overkill. I mean, you've got all those wires you have to worry about. So I decided instead to use this Pico style power supply from RGeek. It's a 150 watt model, and it gives more than enough juice to drive the Raspberry Pi, the LCD, and my audio circuit. Yeah, and then I have these breakout wires in case I want to try to power anything else. And it's going to connect to our Raspberry Pi through this. So this is the Pyrite ATX PSU Cool Kit. I really like this. With this, you can do soft power. You can turn your ITX supply on, and you can do controlled shutdowns. It has 12 volt breakouts and 5 volt breakouts, and yeah, it's pretty slick. And yeah, we can put the fan up there, and we're going to be able to cool down our CPU. And all of this is powered by this 12 volt 10 amp DiLipo. I don't know if I'm saying that right, power supply. Yeah, I really like this. I used several of these on other projects, and they've never let me down. And to keep our CPU cool, we have this Geek Pi blue LED 5 volt or 3.3 volt 40 by 40 by 10 millimeter cooling fan. I've used these on a couple of projects, and I really like them also. And to go ahead and have storage on here, what we're going to have is a ABI portable SSD X160GB. Yeah. And I think I'm going to go ahead and put a fan on here to keep it cool also, because I've read that these things tend to heat up pretty good. And for our USB interface on the rear of the machine, I have these two USB 3.0 rack mount units. Now, these are both 3.0, but one of these is going to be a USB 2.0. And, of course, we're going to have Ethernet or Ethernet access, and I'll just go ahead and run that cable from the Raspberry Pi to this Ethernet extension. And to drive our LCD, I have this driver board. Now, this is very important. There are many different models of the LCDs for the iPad 2. You need to make sure you get the right driver board for yours. Well, actually, it's a driver board that has the right extension. Any driver board, in theory, should work, but there are a lot of driver boards out there with really poorly written drivers, and they will not drive certain models of the iPad 2 LCD screen. To interface between the Raspberry Pi and our LCD, or excuse me, our driver board, I have this 9-degree HDMI cable. And here's the official Raspberry Pi mouse. And we have our official Raspberry Pi keyboard. I love that little keyboard. And sound's going to be provided by a pair of Harman Kardon first generation iMac stereo speakers. Yeah. Okay, here's an update about the storage situation. I'm going to go ahead and replace that SSD that I had with this. This is the Geekworm X862 shield for the Pi 4. And on it, I've installed a 2242 Sunbow 60GB SSD card, which should give me faster read and write speeds than the external SSD hard drive that I was going to put on there before. And this interfaces through the USB 3.0. And there's the box it came in. Just got it today. And here is our slightly modified Macintosh Classic II chassis. And on the very first drill I did, I had a 5mm bit in there, so I really messed up whenever I was installing the standoffs. But I went ahead and did some cleaning up on it, and now it looks just like all the other children. Oh yeah. And here's our driver board bracket for the LCD. It's an old floppy drive bracket that I modified. And here's a bracket for our on and off switch, and for our power brick connection right there. Yeah. Now this is the old bracket that came off of the analog board from the Macintosh Classic II. It was shot, and I added that aluminum brace right there to prevent flex whenever you press the power button or connect the power brick. And here's our rear ports bracket for the USB and for our Ethernet. This is made out of 16 gauge sheet metal. I mean, really tough stuff. Believe it or not, it took about 2.5 hours to go ahead and get those holes cut. They're about the size of a quarter, and I'll get to that later. Okay, here it is with all of our brackets and components installed. Yeah, it looks nice and tight. Let's go ahead and get a close-up on a couple of the components. Okay, well, I didn't record screwing this together, but I mean, everything's pretty self-explanatory. We go ahead and take the RGeek ATX 150 watt supply, and we plug it into the Pyrite board, right? And then we're going to go ahead and take that cooling fan, and we're going to go ahead and screw it down to the Pyrite board. And the Pyrite board attaches to our Raspberry Pi 4 by just slipping down over the GPIO pins. And then we have the Geekworm X862, and it's attached to the Raspberry Pi by these brass studs. Nothing's plugged in from this SSD adapter to the Raspberry Pi yet. Okay, so let's go ahead and start plugging things in. Here we have our input for our power brick. This cable right here. Bring it around over here, and we're going to plug it into our R-Geek ATX. And then we have our grounding cable. And this screw is also a retaining screw for our rear ports bracket. Now let's go ahead and get our fan plugged in, 5 volt. And then we have our ground. Let's go ahead and take a look at our power switch. Now this is a lighted LED power switch, red. And here are our leads. Okay, now here we have our power on switch, and that's going to attach to these pins right here. These first two leads, those are for the LED light on the power switch. So you only need 2 of these pins, and that would be the 2 to the left. And we just plug it on like that. Okay, and here are the breakouts on our Pyrite board. The front 2 screws, that's the 12 volt breakout, and we are going to take that and it's going to plug into our LCD driver board. Now we're going to take our 5 volt breakout and plug it into our Geekworm SSD adapter. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and use the USB connector and attach the adapter. It went from the bottom USB 3.0 port to that 3.0 port. And so now we have the X862 all set up. All right. Okay, now here we have our rear ports. This is where our USB 2.0 is going to go, our USB 3.0, and our Ethernet. So we just go ahead and plug those in. And we have our USB 2.0, and it is going to plug in to... Okay, and then we're going to plug our USB 3.0 port in. And then finally, we just plug our Ethernet cable in. Now that last USB port, that actually powers our audio circuit. So we're going to go ahead and plug that in. Okay, this is our on and off control panel, our brightness and volume control panel for the LCD driver board. And if you look, there used to be an infrared sensor there, like that one. But I went ahead and I cut it off, and I soldered these leads to it. And if you look, there is the floppy drive manual ejection port that I left intact, and it sits right in front of the sensor. So that way we can have contact. Yeah, that turned out good. Yeah, this is the acrylic strip that I used to make the bracket for our speakers. And I like the fact that you can see through it, and that doesn't hide the light that's coming off of the fan on the Pyrite. Okay, here's a nasty little audio amp circuit I built. I mean that, it really is nasty. But you know, I was working with what I had on hand. I had a couple of capacitors, some NPN transistors, and these 1K resistors. You know, when I initially built this, I used some 1/4 watt resistors, and they got so hot, I thought they were going to burn through the acrylic or melt through it and continue to the Earth's core. So, in order to save my project, oh yeah, in Earth, I went ahead and put these 3 watt honking resistors in there. And it is amazing what effect it had on sound. It actually got crappier. I didn't think it was possible. So I'm going to have to do something with that. But it does look cool, and that's really what is important, isn't it? Oh, and for audio to work, I guess we should go ahead and plug it in. There. Okay, remember I told you that these took 2.5 hours to cut out, these 3 holes? And look, they fit perfect. Yeah. Yeah, well, what I did was, these are about the size of a quarter, and so I traced out a quarter, yeah, and then I don't have a 1-inch drill bit, but I do have this 1/2-inch drill bit, drilled through there, and then I used my router bit, and I went real slow, yeah, and I went through probably 3 of those bits doing it. It's 16 gauge sheet metal. I got this so it wouldn't flex when I was unplugging and plugging the cords in, and this stuff is really tough. You know, if I had a CNC controlled plasma cutter, this would have only taken maybe 2 minutes. You know, and I tell my wife, if she really and truly loved me, she would not make me ask permission to buy a plasma cutter. She would demand that I do it. Like I said, 2.5 hours to do that. I could have fixed the gutters. But I had to do this, and the gutters got put off to another day. But what are you going to do? Okay, before I put the chassis on, let's go ahead and take a look one more time. Look at those small screws. You know, I'm probably going to come up with something better to secure that. Not that I don't think it's tight. But if I ever had to ship this somewheres, I don't know. Well, we'll see. Okay, and to install this onto the front bezel, all we're going to do is drop it down. Yeah. Okay, now we can put it on our HDMI cable because the cable sits right in front of the screw. And we plug it into our Raspberry Pi.
And we are cooking with gas.
Oops, almost forgot this. We'll give it one more once over before we put the rear case on. Oh yeah, everything's hooked up. Everything is looking good. Let's do it. Okay, that's what it looks like from the rear with the case on. Go ahead, close up of those ports. Yeah. All right. Yeah, this is my speaker hole. Yeah, that one lined up as well. Okay, plug the keyboard into our USB 2.0 port. And then plug in our power port. And we can see the RGeek ATX is already powered up in standby. Go ahead and enter our power switch. Look at what's going on in there. Yeah, okay, I'm going to reboot so we can watch the screen from the front. Oh, now what a great match. Look at that. Yeah, that is a good looking setup. It really is. Okay, let's go ahead and boot. All right, hit that soft power button. Oh, wow, that sound. It's even worse than I remember. Yep, and there it is. I've got Twister OS installed. Man, I love that operating system. I really do. Now, see, this is one of the drawbacks about using that Pyrite board. You lose network or wireless. Yeah, it's trying to acquire it again. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I don't know. And of course, having a rear case on doesn't help. But if worse comes to the worst, all I'll do is use a wireless bridge on our 3.0 port in the rear. And nope, we weren't able to attain the network. So I'll just plug this Vonix wireless bridge into the back. So we just go ahead and plug that in there. And we plug that in there. Okay, let's see what happens. Go over to here. Yeah, look, and it shows I have a wired connection. So we'll just go ahead and connect to that. And that's it. We are on the network. Uh-oh. What happened? Nothing happened. Why did it do that? Something happened. I don't know. We'll just pretend it didn't happen. We don't want any hiccups. Go ahead and hit Chrome Media Edition. That is so much faster than the 3 Bravo. I gotta say, I'm really impressed with the Raspberry Pi 4. Yeah, let's go to my channel. And let's play a video.
The Macintosh Classic II, in my opinion, the best looking of the compact.
Oh, wow. I'm satisfied with this. Let's go ahead and shut her down. Log out. And then we'll hit shut down. Well, actually, this should take about 10 seconds to shut down. Come on, come on, come on. All right. Man, I really, really like that. Remember that gap I was telling you about way earlier in the video? Well, look at there. Whenever you put the rear case on, what happens is the bracket on the inside slightly pushes up against the LCD and it closes the gap. It flattens it out. Yeah, and you can't see any distortion on the screen or anything. Ah, yeah, I like that. Okay, that's it. I really like the way that came out. I like it. I like it a whole bunch. Well, I'm going to go ahead and put a couple of links in the description about where I purchased many of the items that I used in here. And also, very, very important, I'm going to go ahead and put a link to ETA Prime. It is so much faster to boot off the USB 3.0 using that SSD than it is using the SD card. And ETA Prime has a tutorial on how to do that. And, oh, and one last thing. You know, all this filming and building has gotten me hungry for processed meat. And whenever I get hungry for processed meat, I grab a can of Prairie Built smoked sausage. Oh yeah. The next time you feel you're lacking mechanically separated chicken and pork in your diet, well, you just run on down to the local Piggly Wiggly and you pick up a couple canisters of Sodium Heaven. Oh, and you throw a couple in your backpack and you take a kid fishing and make their day, instead of looking at YouTube videos. I'm Billy. I hope you have a great week. I really hope to see you back here again. And I hope you stay safe.